Welcome to Find Myself Free, the podcast, where we break up with booze, balance our hormones, and heal from the inside out. I'm Ellie Young, certified alcohol-free life coach and functional nutrition practitioner in training, and I'm here to help you break free from the drinking cycle and unlock your best health. After decades of gray area drinking, I was fascinated by my own capacity for change. Now I've made it my mission to pay this gift forward by sharing the biggest game-changing lessons from neuroscience to positive psychology to functional nutrition, all so you can take back your power, balance your hormones, use food as medicine, and feel better than ever. Sobriety is just the beginning. Let's heal, thrive, and create a life you love. Let's dive in. Hey, friend, if you've ever wondered why your gut is still mad at you after quitting alcohol, bloating, cravings, sluggish digestion, I've got you. Your gut took a hit, and unfortunately, a lot of the food we eat isn't doing our gut any favors either. But the good news, you can heal it, and I made it really simple for you. Head over to my show notes and get my free guide, How to Heal Your Gut After Alcohol, because popping a probiotic alone won't cut it. I know because I've been there. It wasn't until I followed this simple 5-step plan that I noticed huge improvements in my gut health. Big win, and something you can easily do too. So grab this free resource and get started today. All right, let's get into the show. Hey, everybody. I think you will truly enjoy today's guest. I'm excited to bring you Heather Lowe. She is the founder of Ditch the Drink, a wellness company helping professionals rethink their relationship with alcohol before it impacts their career and lives. A certified professional life and recovery coach, addiction awareness facilitator, and advisor for the International Center of Addiction Recovery Education, Heather specializes in creating sober, positive workplaces and empowering individuals to thrive alcohol-free. Her work has been featured in the New York Post, Thrive Global, The Fix, Girl Boss, and more. She offers coaching, digital courses, and corporate training, and she's a sought-after speaker on sobriety, workplace wellness, and alcohol-free living. She is a true powerhouse in the sober space, and I think you will appreciate and really relate to her unique take on sober coaching. Without further ado, on to the show. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Find Myself Free. I have a really cool guest I'm excited to introduce you to, Heather Lowe. Welcome to the show, Heather.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm super excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, our paths have crossed a few times in distance. I have seen you in the Sober in the City stuff. I've just seen your name on social media. You're a bit of a powerhouse in the kind of sober influencer world. So I'm grateful to have you on and to hear about your story.
Oh, thank you so much. I love that you say that. Of course, my ego loves to hear it. Also means maybe my hard work is paying off and the message is getting out there. Also, running in the same circles of people that we both respect and admire is totally awesome. And there's a shift. I've been doing Ditch the Drink is the name of my company, and I founded it about 6 years ago when I was 1 year alcohol free, and the landscape was really different back then. I didn't have anybody to follow. There wasn't anyone on Instagram. There was, very few books on the subject. There was little to no podcasts on the topic, and now in the last since I've been doing this, it's really expanded. So it's been fun, and it feels like the work is paying off. The message is getting out there, and it's growing. The world of sober curiosity and a desire for a more alcohol-free lifestyle is growing, and I always credit, like, the pioneers, the people that went before me. I give so much credit to those women that were very few at that time, and now there's so many of us, and I think it's awesome.
I do too. Yeah, I mean, you can pick your flavor of like sobriety influencer, coach, entrepreneur, and it's so inspiring. And the trends are just showing that the next generation just isn't consuming alcohol in the same volumes that we all did. And God bless, right? I mean, if I could go back in time and be a young mother and not drink the way I did, I would do anything to have been influenced in that direction if I could go back.
Right. Well, that's exactly why we do what we do,
Mhm.
right? I mean, I created ditch the drink because it wasn't there and it's what I needed
Mhm.
myself. And I didn't see it, so I decided to create it, So now I get to help women. I get to help women at all stages and ages of their life. But yeah, early parenting and motherhood, there's nothing that matters more to me than motherhood. And my oldest was about 13 when I quit drinking. So yeah. So it's been again 7 years. So she's 20 now. So my relationship with my kids has totally blossomed and thrived, of course, since
Yeah.
ditching the drink. And it wasn't my drinking story, it wasn't a rock bottom type of story. And mothering, even when I was drinking, mothering was the most important thing to me, right? And so I don't like the narrative of like, you're a bad mom if you're a drinker, or you don't care about your kids if you drink too much, because I was just a person struggling myself. And my drinking story, I drank for 30 years.
Mhm.
I had my first drink when I was 12 and I had my last drink when I was 42. I
Wow.
literally drank for 30 years. And it didn't always look like problem drinking. Most of the
Yeah.
time, it actually looked like very normal drinking.
Yep.
And so at the end, it kind of escalated and I was hit with some 3 deaths in a row. I did 3 eulogies, one for my dad and the other 2 for friends that were my age. And I didn't know how to handle grief, and it was just sort of like the tipping point for me of, I had no other coping skills because I had always gone to alcohol, and even though it didn't always look messy or sloppy or concerning, it just came to light that it was the only way I knew how to cope, and I had never really dealt with such uncomfortable emotions such as deep grief, and I think that's pretty true for a lot of people. So,
Absolutely. Mine's very similar. The height of my drinking, and again, most of my drinking looked very normal on the surface. I definitely had a coping mechanism built into me that was pretty habitual, pretty strong. But I lost my 2 dogs back to back during the height of the pandemic, and they were 13 years old. They were my first babies, and I was basically doggy hospice for like a summer after I had just finished homeschooling my 2 boys through the pandemic, and that was when mine reached this point where I was like, "I can't keep living like this." But being highly functioning in the middle of that is also I think that's your message, why it resonates so much with me is that most people are looking for a rock bottom. Most people are looking for some sort of line in the sand that they have to cross, and rather than just like, "I don't feel good the way that this is showing up in my life right now." How does one kinda how do you help people identify that this gray area is really enough for you to motivate you into a different direction?
yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really interesting, and I'm so grateful that I quit drinking before COVID because I have visions of what that would have looked like in my house, and it would have been absolutely terrible. So, but you are not alone, girl. So many women like you, right? COVID was their tipping point for
Mhm.
sure. How do you know? I think that's a good question because it was very confusing for me and let's say even my husband because sure, I was probably drinking too much and we knew that, but I was also the first one up every morning
Mhm.
making lunches and sweeping the floor and cleaning up after myself and after everything. I wasn't drinking at my children's extracurricular activities. I was still running carpool. I didn't drink and drive. I didn't have any of those obvious signs. But that's where you're asking yourself the wrong question, and I know this now because being not that bad, that was what I held on to, being not that bad, or in fact, knowing people that were worse than me, that were bigger drinkers than me. I mean, that was sort of my parameter, my measurement of success. Well, I'm not as bad as her.
Right.
And I don't think that's a good assessment because being not that bad is not an accomplishment. And that's not my biggest dream come true is to just be a drinker that's not that bad. And so typically when I have a first call or a complimentary call with a prospective client, let's say we talk about that. And most women say to me, I want to be the kind of person that can have a drink at dinner every once in a while, or that I can do a champagne toast at a wedding, but not drink all the time. And I say, really? Is that the biggest goal that you have for yourself?
Yeah.
They're like, "No, I wanna write a book. I wanna learn piano. I wanna have a happy marriage. I wanna start my own business. I wanna go scuba diving or traveling," or whatever their real goals are, and I say, "Is alcohol helping you get to those dreams?" No, it's standing in the way. It's standing in the way because of your confidence, first of all, because when you're waking up full of shame or you're breaking promises to yourself like I did, you just don't feel good. You just don't feel good about yourself and your confidence. And when you don't feel good about yourself, you're not willing to take a leap on the big dreams. So I think it gets in the way that way. And you can ask yourself that. And for me, I was waking up miserable. I was dragging myself through every day. And I had even a low grade hangover, let's say, and I'm like, why do you want to dumb yourself down just a little bit?
Right.
We know that alcohol is a numbing agent, and that's why it's so helpful for feelings like grief or resentment or whatever. It numbs that, but you're also dumbing yourself down. You're slowing your brain processing. If you stick your hand in a fire, you're supposed to feel the heat, and alcohol is removing that. So you're putting yourself in dangerous situations, and you don't have your sensors to tell you that. And even in a mild way, even in a low level way, it's not helping you, right? And then waking up and not feeling your best just sucks. And so I was waking up miserable, mad at myself, physically ill, even at a low level. Many of my clients taking ibuprofen is just part of their normal morning routine, and they get free and they're like, here's like a little victory is like, I don't even have ibuprofen anymore.
Oh,
Right. And for me, I got off of like blood pressure medication, and there can be like more significant things, but being miserable every day, that's rock bottom enough. That
right.
like it like I don't have to have a policeman or a doctor or a lawyer or my husband threaten something to say that this isn't good enough for me. So maybe it's not that bad, but is it good enough? Is it good enough for you? And it's probably not. Well, and especially what I know now after being trained in addiction about alcohol and what it does to the body and the science of alcohol, how it affects depression and anxiety and, all these other things. It's not good enough for me. And so that might be a different question to ask.
Yeah, and I think that people get so focused on what they think they're giving up, and
Mm,
and in the beginning, it feels like such a deprivation, marathon, and there are some low feelings, and yet we don't have the perspective. Like, it takes a chunk of time to where you actually get that perspective of how much better you can feel, and most people's jaws drop when they start to feel those benefits, like what it feels like to sleep all the way through the night, not wake up with bloodshot eyes and a puffy face and have to like pound ibuprofen and caffeine and supplements. I was that person. I was like, I'm going to do all the right things with all my nutrition and all my health and all my exercise to try and just break even so that I didn't feel like death every day. And
totally. And
yeah,
some of the exercise for me was punishment,
yeah.
actually. It wasn't a joyful celebration of moving my body. It was punishment to try to sweat out what I had put in the night before.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a big shift I experienced as well is like, "Oh, I'm not doing this just to, like, counter my mistakes from the night before." And so that little shift for most women is to know that, like, you're not sacrificing anything and you really are truly pursuing this. You call sobriety a lifestyle upgrade,
Mm,
and that mindset shift, convincing women that life can actually be better in this direction, how do you package that and sell that? Because it's
mm,
like you can't do it until you try it, until you actually experience what it feels to have those little dopamine boosts now
yeah.
without alcohol and actually feel them and have it feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So I have a method that's called, you'll love this, spoil yourself sober. I am
Oh,
not about deprivation. I am not about giving up, and I am not about sitting with your back to the party or being sad or alone or, just whipping yourself, beating yourself up all day long and not joining in on any fun because you were a bad drinker. Slap your hand, shame on you. That was my biggest fear. That's why it took me so long to evaluate my relationship with alcohol because I was terrified of losing friends, having a boring life, you know. But what I know now and what I would sell is, yeah, you spoil yourself sober. So before my last day one, I had 3 years of on-off drinking. And my first uh experiment was I was going to try to go 100 days alcohol free. And I made it to 70 days and I thought I was cured. So I went back to drinking. We all know that story,
mm,
right? But I will tell you what those 70 days taught me was I felt good about myself. And again, it's the confidence. When my head hit the pillow at night, I was still with myself. I was starting to cultivate this relationship with myself that I had never had. And I started to recognize the loud, mean inner critic that was the tape that was running in the background of my own mind, telling myself I wasn't good enough all the time. And I started to talk back to her. And I started to find reasons that I was good enough. And I started to keep my promises. And I started to recognize what I felt and what I needed. And I started to give that to myself.
Yeah.
And so even though I was saying no to margaritas, I was trying to find a way to enjoy myself as much as possible. I was going to get the most indulgent dessert then.
Mhm.
Right. If I was going to say no to margaritas, I was going to say yes to the hot cookie skillet at the end or whatever that looked like. And I found ways all day, every day to tune in and give myself what I wanted. And that could be as simple as alone time or a walk around the block, right? Or it could be big time. It could be a massage, or it could be a manicure, or it could be a trip to Target, or it could be a vacation. Like whatever it was, I started to tune into what I really wanted and needed, and I gave myself that. And I did not hold back because I would give myself whatever I wanted to drink. So I used that same sort of mentality to give myself whatever I needed that was going to keep me alcohol free in that moment. And it turns out those are the things that I continue. So now my life is really beautiful because I get everything I want whenever I want it.
Yeah.
And I also say, like, well, I'm not drinking. So, I'm not spending money on alcohol. I can spend money on books and the best candles and the best socks and like a cleaning lady and somebody to mow my lawn or, whatever it is that I want. Um, and it's beautiful. Life without alcohol is beautiful. The other thing is experiences are big to me. And when you're my life drinking anyways was sitting around drinking. So it could be on a boat, it could be at somebody's house, it could be at a bar, but it was always sitting around a table with alcohol. And that was always the thing.
Right.
And without it, it's like when you go to a concert, feeling the vibe of the music and the crowd and the wind and the lights and you are one with the
Mhm.
music and the crowd, and you're not losing your credit card and losing your seat and losing your phone and having to go to the bathroom, having to line for another drink, and, like, the drinking is a distraction from the concert, and the drinking is a distraction from the card game or the sporting event or the movie or the dance or whatever it is that you're doing. And so my whole experience is elevated, and you see this so clearly on vacation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where really there's a spotlight, and it's like, I'm not wasting 1 minute drunk or hungover. I'm fully alive to experience this entire vacation, and whether that's whale watching in Mexico, which I just did, or seeing the shows in Vegas, which I've done a million times, I'm really there, and I'm not wasting 1 second of that time being dumbed down or recovering.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I've lived more life in the last 4 years alcohol-free than I did in the last, like, decade. I'm just so much more willing to try stuff. I'm so much more curious. I'm so much more willing to follow my curiosities into, like, different directions because I'm tuned in to myself. I'm not drowning out. I think most women resonate with this. We use alcohol to meet so many of our needs that
Mhm.
we forget how to really take care of ourselves, especially as, like, young mothers, you know, and we start to build all this resentment because we're just like, "Oh, this is upsetting to me. I'm gonna drink it away. Oh, I really wanna go do that. I really wanna, like, get a babysitter, but instead it's like, I feel guilty, so I'm gonna, stay home and slave away with the kids or whatever." And
Mhm.
that waking up from that part of like, "Hey, you have a voice here, and it doesn't have to come from a place of resentment all the time," you can actually, like, start declaring what you want again and pursuing it and learning how to take care of yourself. It's such a magical, magical place, and the more we talk about it, the more I just wanna paint that picture for other women and be like, everything you really want is, like, on the other side of an alcohol-free life.
For
Uh,
sure. It's such an awakening. But, our people, our loved ones, there is an adjustment period. And like you mentioned, I think one thing is like, if you can go 30 days, go 30 days. My program is 90 days of one on one coaching because it's exactly what you talked about. Go a little longer.
yeah,
It takes some time for your brain chemistry to figure out that you're not going to be artificially stimulating yourself with a dopamine hit or with alcohol.
yeah,
And so it takes some time for your brain to start creating those chemicals that feel good. And when you had a good time most likely when you were a child before you ever had alcohol, but then you came to rely on alcohol, so your body doesn't know how to make that itself. And eventually it will. It will come back. And if it doesn't, you can explore what else is going on there. You'll at least have the clarity to do that. But in most cases, your own feel good chemicals come back. So you start to wake up feeling good,
Right.
not naturally. But it doesn't happen in 30 days. And I think that's the kicker is that people expect they see on Instagram, they hear the health benefits, they do a dry January, and they expect magic
Yep.
at that time. And if you have to go a little bit longer
Mhm.
because the benefits start to multiply, and it also starts to become more effortless to not drink.
Right.
The first time you do anything is hard. So the first time you do a social event, the first time you go to dinner, the first time you're with your in-laws, the first holiday, the first vacation, all those things, the very first time you're creating new neural pathways. And it's really, really hard. It's like taking your little car to go uphill in the mud when it's used to going downhill in the tracks already made, right? So it's a big, big challenge. It's incredibly hard at first. And you don't seem to be getting the benefits immediately. Change is slower and harder than we want it to be, and that's true 100% of the time. So that's the other thing I'm very honest in my complimentary calls about, that I can't give you an easy button, but
Right.
there are things that can make it easier. And when you said, like, how do you sell this, like, like a sober lifestyle is an elevated lifestyle? It's absolutely contagious because I have a community of folks called the Insiders of it's professional women only, and we're all on an alcohol-free journey and we meet. And everybody in there's people struggling to get to day one, and there's people over 5 years alcohol-free,
Right.
and it sells itself, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can see it. You can see the changes in the people's lives, and it's not without effort. It's definitely hard, and it definitely takes time, but it absolutely happens. And you start to be attracted to that.
Yeah.
And so you want to move towards that instead of just feeling like you're giving up alcohol. You see everything there is to gain by moving towards the freedom that being alcohol free gives you because your headspace is not hijacked by alcohol all the time, like mine was as a drinker.
I love that mindset shift, like, that is 100% the backbone of one of my coaching method is to, like, focus on that future self, that and if you don't know what that looks like, look to other women who are doing it and can't shut up about it because it's so transformative and profound in their own lives. You've done a lot of work bringing awareness to alcohol use in corporate settings. How how can workplaces become more kind of recovery ready and support employees who want to drink less?
Oh my gosh, I love this topic because I sold HR solutions and I was in sales. So that's a big drinking industry, right? And often drinking felt like part of my job, to be honest. I was the only female and all male sales teams. So I could be part of the boys club if I drank. I got access to decision makers at bars and happy hours and networking events that I may not have gotten in the office. And so I really feel passionate about this because we have to create an employee culture that's safe to say, I don't drink. I don't want to drink. And we have to offer options that aren't that. And with my clients, again, they're leaders, they're high level positions, they're highly professional, highly successful women, and they're doing great on their own. And then they have to go to some work event and it's terrifying them. They're wondering if they can keep this because they feel so much pressure. They don't know how to turn down a drink around a table of executives that are splitting a bottle of wine, let's say. And so we just have to change the conversation in the workplace. And there is a federal initiative called Recovery Friendly Workplaces that offers an emblem of distinction. Actually, there's a lot of ways to get that. It's cool because there's many paths to get to earn points, let's say, that goes towards getting an emblem. And some of that is having a leader talk about their experience. I think COVID brought to light mental health. I think we can't talk about mental health without talking about substance use also, because it typically goes hand in hand.
Mm.
So if a leader shares their experience, I think that's the best way to set an example. I think offering options like alcohol-free options, Stanford University actually coined the term equally attractive non-alcoholic beverages. And
Mm.
so that means don't give me a Capri Sun juice box or some tap water. Give me an actual beautiful, sophisticated adult drink with complex flavors that doesn't have alcohol, right? So, alcohol-free beer or wine, or maybe an alcohol-free spirit that has a garnish or glass. I think offering that at all events is great. Looking at not having your events around alcohol, but maybe a different sort of activity.
Mhm,
People, instead of open bars, can have drink tickets, maybe a limit of 2,
mhm.
right? So, because alcohol in the workplace has a lot of really bad outcomes when it comes to the bottom line, sexual harassment, workers' comp. I could go on, but basically nothing good comes from it. And what we think alcohol does, like bond employees, it actually doesn't do that. It creates an unsafe environment for many.
Yeah.
And so, I think talking about it is awesome. There are places, including Salesforce, which is like the biggest sales organization. They have
Where my
something called
husband works.
they have Sober
Yeah.
Force.
Yeah.
It's got thousands of people in it.
Yep.
And yeah, they started an employee affinity group. And so and 2/3 of American families are affected by addiction. So it's you or it's somebody you know. So it's basically everybody. And so you can be part of this affinity group and feel safe with other folks that are right. You can be sober curious, you can be sober serious, you can have a family member that's struggling, and you can just feel like you belong and you're not alone and have a safe place for conversation. So I think there's a lot of things that employers and employees could do. And I teach HR consultants about this. And I'm a certified facilitator of addiction awareness training, and anybody can become that. And if anybody's interested in that, please reach out to me. I'll share more. But you can get a 10-hour training so you can go into workplaces and talk about this and get the presentation and learn how to talk to civic organizations, community groups, corporate, corporate places, or anywhere. We just have to change the conversation and make it safe for people to not drink.
Gosh, I have so much to say on this topic too, because my husband's at Salesforce, and
Awesome.
the guy who started Sober Force, Chris Anthony, was
Yes.
his former boss.
Oh, I
He's
love
a
him.
he's a friend of ours, and in fact, I actually have a very drunk story upon meeting Chris Anthony at a Salesforce golfing event up at Terranea in this fancy it was one of their work meetings, and they were allowed to bring their wives, so Dave brought me up, and I went golfing with a bunch of the guys, drank all day, then went to this work event where I met and I knew he was sober, and I was sloshed. Like, I was, like, you know, wavering, and he was excited to meet me. He's like, "I've heard so much about you." I was a big runner at the time. I was training for a half marathon, so my husband was always, like, bragging about me and how, like, fit I was, and I was a hot mess. And the next morning, I felt so terrible, but I was scheduled to run 11 miles in my training, and I punished myself and made myself still go run 11 miles and then go to, like, some company breakfast with him. That was my first meeting of this guy, Chris Anthony, and
Oh,
then fast forward to, like, maybe a year later was when I broke free, and I saw him riding in the neighborhood, and it was like our paths crossed, and I wanted to, like, tell him, and I had started being public on Instagram about my sobriety, and he came up to me and was like, "That's incredible what you're doing." I mean, it was just such a it's like our paths were meant to, like, come together again, so that's really cool. I love that my husband has him as an ally at his company because my husband's mostly alcohol free. He attempts to stay alcohol free at these work events, but he caves for all the reasons you mentioned pressure, trying to bond. There's certain categories of customers that are like these old school, old men's club where it's the only way to hang out with them is to like drink whiskey late into the night, you know? And it's such a struggle. You mentioned something that a company can get a recovery-friendly emblem.
mhm.
I personally don't love the word recovery-friendly because it implies that everyone's in recovery, which is a very different message than what we talk about, that you don't have to have, like, been, like, at this point where, like, you're being forced into sobriety, right? It's more of, like, an optimistic path. It's not like I'm always gonna be in recovery. What do you think about that?
Girl, let's talk about it
Yeah.
because um this has been a struggle for me, but I started off very resistive to recovery. That word, let's say. And you know what? Some people don't like the word sober.
Yeah.
or sobriety. A lot of my clients don't. Sober was always fine with me. Recovery is not something I was comfortable with. And because I had this vision of, I thought recovery meant going back to who you were before, let's say. And I had my first drink when I was 12. So I wasn't going back to anything
Yeah.
because I was not going to go back to being a 12-year-old or 11-year-old, right?
Yeah.
Like I had too much life underneath me. So I never liked the word recovery either, but I think it depends on your definition.
Sure.
And so now I define recovery as meaning somebody who's healing.
Mhm.
And like recovery, like you're recovering from anything, right? And I personally think addiction and recovery are part of the human condition. I don't think it's saved for alcoholics, especially, or for drug users, especially, or anything like that. I think addiction is a big spectrum. I think we're all trying to escape pain in some way. I think that's a very human thing to do.
Mm.
So I think it's everyone. I think addiction and recovery is everyone. And for some people, it's shopping or scrolling. And for some people find alcohol and then they don't find anything else, right? Some people find alcohol and then they quit it and then they find other things.
Yeah.
Some people do it in all sorts of ways, but it's kind of like a us versus them thing.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's everyone. I think it's all of us. So I want to normalize it. Now I kind of feel different about recovery because I feel like I'm proud of it. And so what? And it means I've overcome something that
Mhm.
was bad for me. And I think I can say that with my head held high and that I can turn around and hold my hand out to anybody who's struggling with that. So I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
It's taken me some time.
Yeah.
I think our language is limited. I think we don't have the right words. I mean, that's why 7 years ago, so this is interesting. I made a Facebook announcement when I was 1 year sober. And I was that picture of Beyonce in the shower planning her speech, right? Like from day two,
Yeah.
how I was gonna share this with my
Yeah.
community. Um, and I made it a very casual Facebook
Yeah.
announcement because I was terrified of what people would think. Because if I say I quit drinking, then they're going to say, "Are you an alcoholic?" And I really didn't want to call myself that. And I really didn't feel like I fit a lot of the narratives
Right.
and stereotypes that you would think of with that. So I was resistant to it. Now I feel totally differently. Right now I feel like if I'm a person in recovery, good for me. And aren't we all? And if
Yeah.
not, shouldn't we all be? I mean,
Yeah.
certainly we all have things that we're trying to overcome in our life, and we all have patterns and habits that have served us for a period of time that maybe no longer do.
Mm.
We've all tried to distract ourselves with things. We're all humans. So why would that be different for anybody? So yeah, I think I'm in
Yeah.
a recovery, but I think everybody is. And if they're not, I hope they find it. I feel a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Bigger than coming out on Facebook for me was coming out on LinkedIn because of my professional community, and
Sure.
that's how I met Chris Anthony. So,
Oh,
when you get brave enough, to start to share your story and start to say it out loud, which again, it wasn't in my first year. It wasn't in my first 30 days. I did not talk like this way
yeah.
back then. But since you see there's a really big community out there for you and you belong everywhere, really.
Yeah. I know the words we choose to define ourselves in these kind of early phases are super important. And I think it's very top of mind for somebody who's kind of like sober curious and on the fence there. And I remember when I became alcohol free and I started coaching and I needed to like build a brand and they were like, here are the words you say and here are the words you don't say. And it was kind of like for a while there, I was like, I don't say sober. I don't call myself sober. I say alcohol free. And I don't say I'm in recovery. I don't even know if I had a replacement for that.
Mm,
But again, for me, it was and I'm still probably hung up on this. I'm not quite where you are. I'm still hung up on any type of shame that that version of those words brings to my mind. It might not bring it to everyone's mind, but I do understand that those are the words most people identify this whole journey with. And so you can't speak to your little silo of people. You have to be like, this is so I use sober all the time now. Um,
mhm,
even though to me, I'm not really even distinguishing between like, oh, do you do CBD or THC or any other? I mean, if you use caffeine, technically, are you sober? Or do you use adaptogens? Like anything that can change your state, that
mhm.
is, are those things that we need to disclose or say, we're sober from everything, and so that to me doesn't matter so much. It's more that for me, it feels like it defines whether you're struggling with it still or not.
Mhm.
Versus like, no, I'm in a completely different place where I am like pursuing next level wellness and it has nothing to do with my relationship with alcohol at all. It's completely
Totally.
next level, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy because, even as a sober coach, I don't think about alcohol.
Yeah.
I know that's wild, but it's like, it's nothing to me.
Yeah.
It's nothing to me. It used to be the most important thing in my life. It took up all my headspace, and it's nothing to me now. So that is what freedom is, right? Eskimos have like 100, 200 words for snow.
Hmm.
We don't have the right language. We don't have the right language, but I feel like I can identify with any or of all of it if I give myself the right definition. And I've also coached people through we give ourselves a stigma,
Hmm.
right? Like we think a certain way about alcoholics, let's say.
Sure.
And so we don't want to include ourselves in that.
Hmm.
But we're furthering the stigma or the narrative if we do that. If we could say, "Yeah, that's me too," if we wanted to. Yes, I'm in recovery, or yes, I'm an alcoholic. If you choose to use that word, it's
Hmm.
not really a medical term. It doesn't really mean
Right.
anything, right? But whatever it is, if I start to claim that for myself or call myself that first, it kind of feels better than feeling name called by somebody else.
Sure.
And if there's a piece of that that I can identify with and just go, um, think whatever you want. Like, it doesn't matter. It's what I think that matters. And then I always ask people like, well, what do you think about me? Because typically my clients, they followed me or they found me or they get to know me before they sign up, invest in working with me. Right. And they are attracted to me and they think, well, you're awesome. Like you've done something awesome and you're so comfortable talking about it and stuff. And I want to be like you.
Hmm.
And I say, if you can see that in me, then you can see that in yourself too.
Hmm.
Right? If there's a piece of you see that in me, then you see that in yourself and you can become that. So, it's a journey. It is a journey, and I always say it's a process, like, you're not the same person on day 1 that you are on day 100, that you are on day 1,000, because you change in the process. You start to change throughout the process, so there's no way to predict that. To each their own, though, and come up with your own language. Come up
Yeah.
with language that works for you. Definitely, to each their own.
Yeah. And shifting into a place where you're not consumed by shame in your journey, you're consumed by growth and feeling empowered and being proud of what you're doing and what you're accomplishing. And what makes it so exciting is that we drank for decades. And so this version of ourselves, even my 4 years into it, your 7 years into it, we're still babies in
Mm.
this new phase of our life. And that's why it's still just so like I can just like taste it and grab it sometimes and just be like, this is so much better than like
Oh my gosh.
anything
Yeah.
I ever did before, and I think I mean, we're clearly in our zones of genius wanting to just continue to spread this message far and wide and help as many other people get there.
Yeah.
But I love these kind of conversations about kind of the nuance of the language because I think that can trip people up. I think it can really trip people up because you are forced to talk about it. You are forced to identify yourself. That is part of the coming out of it is to be like, I'm on this side of alcohol now. And you are met with that every single place you go for the rest of your life. Are you participating in this massive cultural ritual or are
Mhm.
you not? And what does that say about you? You know?
Yeah, well, it's very unnatural because as animals, we need to be part of a tribe. We need to be part of a crew for our own safety and belonging, or we're gonna get eaten alive.
Mm.
And so when you don't drink, you're choosing to put yourself outside that group. It's very unnatural and it's very uncomfortable. So I definitely get that. And I am a party girl. Like
Yeah.
in fact, some people say like, well, you don't have to drink because you're already outgoing and all that stuff. It's like, so I don't have to drink to like be an extrovert. I'm already an extrovert, but I'm putting myself on the outs by not drinking. And that was a felt like an easy connector.
Yeah.
And so totally. But also it's the best thing I've ever done, and for me, it's the number 1 domino, and for my clients as well, it's the number 1 domino. If you quit drinking, you can address your nutrition, you can address your fitness, you can address your relationship with your husband, you can address your career question marks, you can address your grief, your trauma, it is your mental health, whatever it is, you have to get alcohol out of the way to do any of those other things. Because if you continue to drink, you continue to stay stuck and you don't have the clarity or the confidence to address any of the other things that you want. So I'm really proud of my sobriety now and I don't drink and I like that about me.
Mhm.
And I think it says everything about me.
Yeah.
And it's okay. But there are still moments where I feel uncomfortable because I'm putting myself on the outs, right? In a group of acquaintances. I recently did a dinner for my brother-in-law for his birthday, and it was a drink paired dinner. And
Mhm.
my husband and I sat at the end and didn't partake in that part. And people didn't know if we were drinking or not. And I didn't want it to be the topic of conversation at this party. And I'm not ashamed of it, but it didn't feel like a safe place to talk about it. Also, I'm a sober coach. I do that for work. I don't need to talk about that at the dinner table right now. You know what I mean? Like, so it can still be awkward for me too, because again, I don't think we have the right language for it. But getting sober is the best thing I've ever done. And the more I can promote that, the happiness being on this side, like you said,
Mhm.
the more it makes it easier for the woman coming behind me.
Absolutely, and I know there's people out there listening to you today who love your vibe, so I'd love to share how people can work with you or find out more about what you're doing.
Yeah, awesome. Ditchthedrink.com. Come to my website, read all about it. And I've got a weekly newsletter. I've got a free guide for transformation. I'm a certified recovery coach, sober coach, but I'm also a certified life coach. So I love to tease like, come for ditching the drink and then stay for the life coaching because after you ditch the drink, you're like, wow, I've built this life that really doesn't work for me. And so we can one by one start to address all the things. I also train coaches. I help get folks certified and help them start a business. So that's a wonderful thing I do. And I have this like beautiful full circle thing where often my clients get alcohol free and then they want to become coaches and get a community for themselves. So I can support all of that. I can also speak to your workplace, teach you how to speak to your workplace. We didn't talk about it, but I do a lot of things, which is a blessing and a curse, right? But I'm just gonna say like it's awesome because I like variety and there's a lot of things that I do and I enjoy all of it. I do one-on-one coaching as well. And private coaching, I have to limit the amount of clients that I have because I have unlimited text and email support. Like it's a deep dive and I give my clients my whole heart. And we also didn't mention like I have a social work degree, so my whole heart is like a very big
Hmm.
whole heart to each client. So I only take a limited number of one-on-one.
Yeah.
So that's why I like to fill my time with these other things like speaking to workplaces, I have an app and a community group, training coaches and working with workplaces and all the other things. I also have a podcast, the Peripatia podcast, which is not a sober podcast, but it's women's stories. And I, like I said, I think we're all in recovery from something. So it's a podcast that's about that.
Very cool. Yeah, I will include links to everything she just mentioned in the show notes, everybody, but I just think it's a evidence of just what a transformation going alcohol free can be. Like you just showed how many different directions you have moved in, that the ripple effect of your transformation is spreading far and wide. It is so inspiring to see. And for someone like me, the phenomenon of women who get sober and then want to spread that and coach that, like it's a big deal because you kind of feel like it's the best kept secret. It's so natural for women to wanna help other women get to this place too. So thank you so much for everything you do in this space and all the impact and influence you're having in such a positive way.
I love to be connected with you. It is so great to link arms and be marching in the same direction. So thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to continuing to watch you grow.
Thank you, Heather, and I'd love to have you on in, like, 6 months from now to see what you got cooking. What's next for you?
Good.
All right.
Definitely. Thank you.
Take care.